Welcome to Now Daily. I'm Robert Crawford. Here's what's happening now. The Iran deal keeps getting stranger and stranger. Right now, it looks like Iran just struck a major blow against basically the dollar. So, I think we reported a few weeks ago that Iran cut this deal with the U.S. last year in 2015. And a few weeks ago, the U.S. paid it about $1.7 billion, literally a check for $1.7 billion from the State Department as part of that deal. As part of, I guess they owed them a few $100 million from like the 1960s and 70s. So they said compounding interest was now worth $1.7 billion. Okay, so we paid them about $1.7 billion. Now, Iran comes out and says, look, we no longer want to accept U.S. dollars for our oil or our past oil futures. We only they're preferring euros. They're not allowing dollars, they want it in euros. So you have to ask yourself, why is this a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because all these countries are now moving away from the dollar. Now, the euro is still somewhat connected to the dollar. And this move probably specifically came because the euro has lost some of its strength, which makes the dollar more stronger, basically. So you would think that they actually would want it in dollars now, since it's actually one of the strongest currencies. But this move away from the dollars to the euro is really putting strain now on the Petro Dollar, which we've seen the BRICS currency come out, which is really only a national currency for developing nations, but BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And about, I think it's like 123 other countries have gotten together. They each put in or contributed a certain amount of gold. We're talking hundreds of tons of gold, and they've created a gold-backed currency called BRICS, which is just about to hit the scene. They've been working on it for the last few years. Why does all this matter to you? Well, at least in America, we still use dollars, and that's really the only thing that's been keeping America so much stronger than all these other countries. We're seeing economic turmoil in pretty much every other country, right? We're seeing it in China. The stock market's gone way below 40% just in the last year. So it's pretty much lost half its stock value. We've seen the currency start to plummet. We've seen the same thing happen in European countries. France, 2 weeks ago, declared national emergency, economic emergency, yet they're still spending like crazy. We've seen this happen in Spain, bankruptcy, Greece, bankruptcy, Italy, bankruptcy. And you may say, oh, well, I don't understand what this means. Why does any of this have anything to do with me and the dollars that I have in my pocket? You need to understand how this whole system works as a whole. So the system works because the dollar right now is the reserve currency. It hasn't always been that way. It's actually only been that way for about maybe 41 years. In 1971, Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Before 1971, you could literally go into a bank and redeem your money for gold. Or at least a portion of it. At least that's what they said. Really, in I think it was 1933, maybe 31, but FDR actually confiscated all the gold. And before that, your dollar, you literally could walk into Bank of America back in like 1910 and exchange a dollar bill for a silver dollar, or a $20 bill for an ounce of gold. Most people don't realize that. They don't even comprehend that, because now we have debit cards, we have credit cards. You don't even think about it. But these are huge, huge things. So why is this important to us right now? Well, before it was backed by gold and silver. And the Constitution specifically states, Article 1, I believe Section 10, that we should only use gold and silver for our debts. So in 1971, basically what happened is let's go back. Let's start at 1933, World War II. The dollar was still very strong. There was a lot of issues in Europe, especially economically. The war starts breaking out. The economy's tanking. The 1929 Great Depression, that starts happening. Everyone's crunching the dollar. Keep in mind, in 1913 is when the Fed came in. They've even admitted that they caused the Great Depression by not allowing more currency in circulation and pulling back because it's a debt-based currency. Go watch Mike Maloney's videos on YouTube. I think he's based in LA. He has some really great videos put together that explains all this perfectly. But let's just look at the dollar. So World War II happens, and everyone in Europe and around the world is afraid for their gold, and because that's what people still used as really money. The paper was just an easy exchange of the gold. They were just really gold certificates. And they brought all their gold into America to protect it in the Federal Reserve banks. So a few years go by, and they start withdrawing that gold. And then in 1971, they realize, hey, we don't have enough gold to pay them back. We've already spent their gold, so we have to figure out something. So Nixon says, okay, you can't exchange your dollars anymore for gold. We're just temporarily relieving that. Well, it's been temporary up to now, which is 2016. So that was in 1971. So it was pretty much permanent. So now we have this fiat currency. Fiat means by decree. So the government decrees it, the currency. They say you can only pay taxes with the Federal Reserve notes, which is unconstitutional. And that's pretty much what's been going on. So the only thing that's been propping that dollar up, since there's no gold behind it really, now it's just pieces of paper. And it's just supply and demand. How many pieces of paper are out in the market? That's really what's controlling the price of the dollar right now. But what's really helped it too has been that they pegged it back in the 70s to oil. So they cut a deal with OPEC. They said, hey, OPEC, you can't sell your oil for anything but dollars. So now OPEC can only accept dollars for their oil, and that's why everyone had to, or most countries had to exchange their currency into dollars in order to purchase the oil, which made them kind of have to use the dollar per se. So now that the oil structure is breaking down, the oil itself has now plummeted in price. There's too much supply. We're seeing countries like Russia, China, and now Iran come out and say, hey, we want euros instead of dollars for the first time in the last 30, 40 years. And we're starting to see these cracks in the value of the dollar. And since it's just a fiat currency, once other countries lose trust in the dollar, that means that they're not going to invest in the dollar anymore, which means buying treasury bonds, which is where the majority of the money gets created. Not even talking about the bank fractional reserve banking. It's a whole other thing. But going back to why this is important with this Iran deal, or what Iran is doing, Iran is being very aggressive right now towards the United States and its ally, which I don't even understand why we're allied with them, except for the oil, Saudi Arabia. Two different ideologies of Muslim going on there. That's really where that's coming in. We come in because it's about the oil and the money. Now, when people say it's about the oil and the money, remember what I just said. It's because of the petrodollar. Once the petrodollar crumbles, what value is America? What value is our dollar if no one wants it anymore? So let's ask yourself that. These countries are lining up against it, and the political powers in play, which is part of this cabal, which we keep continuing to talk about. It's a real conspiracy. It's not just a theory. They are going to a global government. The way they can do that is by destroying the power of the United States, because you can't have a superpower in their ideal and then transferring that power to a third party like the UN or the TPP agreement, which would actually give corporations power over the states. These things are happening. You need to pay attention to them. This is why Iran is important, because of the petrodollar, because this dollar war, which is really what the oil war is, can start a real world war. So you need to pay attention to it. A lot's going on in the economy. We've seen The stock market decreased by over 10% just in the last, I think, 6 months. I just read that the other day. So things are declining, but now gold, it seems to have bottomed. It's coming back up. So people are going to be flooding to a new gold, back to gold, basically, because it's a store of value. It always continues to be a store of value. I also like real estate. Any cash flow asset is good. Cash flow. What does cash flow asset mean? It means every month or every quarter or at least every year, it gives you a check. You're making some money back on that investment, and you get to retain that investment, such as a rental property getting rental income. Could be stocks that pay a dividend. Every quarter they pay maybe 5% of the shares, something like that. Those things are great. You have to be able to protect yourself, especially as the dollar starts going down. Right now it's at a peak, but is this going to start turning around? I think we're seeing that happen right now. This is Now Daily. Subscribe, and comment below. We're out there looking for the truth, figuring out what's going on behind the scenes. We'll talk about this election coming up in just a second.
Thanks for listening. This has been Now Daily with Robert Crawford, uncovering real stories worth sharing. Want more? Visit the website nowdaily.com/show.